Hey everyone, welcome to a special edition of the Neo Marketing Podcast. Today I'm with Rachel Mathew. She is the co-owner of Polston Tax. She is an attorney, an accountant, a public speaker, a TV personality, a business owner, and an expert on some things we're going to talk about today, specifically the IRS, COVID, and managing your business in 2020.
Welcome to the Golden Group Neo Marketing Podcast, a bi-weekly discussion of best practices, latest trends, and modern techniques for professional business communication, including advertising, marketing, digital channels, social media, public relations, and alternative options.
Good morning, Rachel. How are you today?
Fantastic. How are you, Kyle?
Oh, very good. Happy to have you on the podcast today. I'm super excited to talk to you because your areas of expertise, you have a lot of them, but a couple of the areas of expertise you have, I know very little about outside of owning my own business. So I'm super excited to get your expert take on a lot of things that are front of mind for business owners right now because of COVID-19 and how it's affected business. And of course, with the government support, refunds, all kinds of things like that. So I want to jump right in and talk about business taxes in response to if they've taken PPP or EIDL funding. So give a general overview for small business owners about what the government's trying to do to help them during COVID-19 and what they need to be considering if they have applied for and if they're managing PPP or EIDL funds.
Okay, great. Very important topics right now with COVID-19 still decimating our economy and all business owners really trying to figure out, are we trying to hang on or are we in recovery mode and trying to figure out what their business needs. So as far as the government's response specifically, everyone knows there was a round of stimulus checks that came out, but for business owners specifically, there was the PPP loans and the EIDL loans like you referenced. Right now, business owners should be and can be applying for forgiveness on those loans. So both of those loans had very specific restrictions and parameters on how those funds could be used to obtain forgiveness, but now is the period of time, and it's really 8 weeks after you've obtained funding to 24 weeks. The law was changed after the initial CARES Act, but changed to give people 24 weeks to spend that money, and it fit within the parameters of what can be forgiven. And also the payroll requirement went down so that you could spend less money on payroll and still be forgiven. So if you have not yet applied for forgiveness, if you have used your PPP funds up, you need to put your bank statements together or wherever those funds were and how they were used, and get your supporting documentation ready. Complete the application, which will be with your specific lender, and submit it for forgiveness. Now, the SBA has an application for forgiveness. And I get asked a lot, do I just submit the SBA's form to my lender or does my lender have a form? Honestly, it varies between lenders.
Okay.
So just contact your lender and say, how do I apply for forgiveness? That's the first piece. Second piece, same thing with the EIDL. You can apply for forgiveness. Some people took the EIDL money and didn't use it. You can return funds that you haven't used. Some people got more PPP money than they thought, and that's what I'm thinking of with the EIDL funds that people have in excess. But the main thing I want people to know with the EIDL funds and the PPP loan funds is under the rules, you're not allowed to use both for payroll and have both forgiven. So make sure if you use PPP funds for payroll, you explicitly make it clear, here were the funds, here's what I use for payroll, and then don't also use those EIDL funds also for payroll because now you're losing forgiveness on both.
That's great advice. Actually, that was going to be my next question for you is what is maybe the number one, number two mistakes or things that business owners are doing wrong that might get them in trouble or make their forgiveness more complicated?
Right. The EIDL funds, one thing that people need to know about those EIDL funds, and it's going to come down to proving what you spent the money on and classifying what that money was that it was the EIDL funds and not some other money. But let's say, so you deal a lot with marketing clients who use marketing or clients who are the agency for the marketing. And marketing is a tricky subject when it comes to those EIDL funds, because the EIDL funds have to be used on some ongoing need of the business, not a capital investment. So like a mortgage or a rent payment, those would be considered contracts that had already been entered into. I got a lot of questions from realtors who had obtained the EIDL funds, and they said, can I use these funds to put together a video of a home I'm listing? And the answer is no. If you want forgiveness on that, that would be considered a new expense and not within the parameters of what the EIDL fund can be forgiven for. So you can use the money, but if you're trying to get forgiveness, you can't use it for some new capital investment or new expense. A lot of companies, some clients that I worked with had ongoing contracts with marketing companies. So they pay a set amount every single month to a marketing company. Well, that could be a certain contract that had already been agreed to prior to getting the EIDL funds that is considered an ongoing cost of the business. So those could be forgiven.
So an ongoing contract like a retainer would be a liability that could be considered payable via EIDL?
Yes, it could fall within the forgiveness parameters of the EIDL fund.
Very good. Also talking about IRS, and as we look at the year, there's potential for a lot more businesses to file losses this year than maybe they have before, or businesses that maybe have never filed a loss or haven't in a very long time. If a business owner is looking at potentially having a loss this year and filing for a loss, is there anything different they need to do in their preparation or in their relationship with their tax professional to file a loss for 2020 as opposed to in a typical year where they're showing profit and paying taxes on those profits?
Yeah, so when we're talking about the tax returns themselves, there's going to be considerable changes for this year with COVID-19. For anyone who's a business owner, who's self-employed, there's a couple different things aside from just claiming the losses that I want to make sure everyone's aware of. So one, yes, if you're going to document a loss, losses this year I would anticipate are not going to be scrutinized as keenly as they have been in the past, where the IRS is trying to see if you're trying to evade taxes or dodge taxes or claiming expenses that should be disallowable. This year, I would anticipate more people are going to be claiming losses. The IRS is not going to be auditing those losses and scrutinizing whether they're valid or not. Now, with a loss, though, you have to keep in mind that there are rules on how many years of losses you can claim before the IRS comes in to see if you should be reclassified as a hobby instead of a business.
Right.
So there's nothing wrong with claiming a loss this year. Typically, after 3 years of losses, though, the IRS will come in to audit and investigate if this business should be reclassified as a hobby. And if so, that completely changes the tax structure of your business and what you're going to be able to write off and so on and so forth. But besides the losses, I also wanted to touch on 2 other major changes for tax returns this year. And maybe I'll just add in one more quick thing since we've got a deadline date coming up. But September 15th, if you filed an extension, make sure you're filing your business tax returns by September 15th. Personal tax returns, if you filed an extension, they're due by October 15th. If you cannot pay the taxes that are due, still make sure you file the tax return. It's criminal not to file. It falls under one of the elements of potential evasion, trying to not file or not disclose the income and taxes that you owe. If you can't pay, there's options available. So that's number 1. Number 2, there is a payroll tax credit that is available for business owners if you pay payroll. And it's not available for payroll that you paid with PPP funds, because if you claim this employee tax credit, you lose the PPP forgiveness. So you can pay payroll with PPP funds, but other payroll that you pay with other funds, you can apply for this employee tax credit. And it's actually huge. It's Under the original bill, it was 50%, which means for up to $10,000 of employee wages that were paid, you can take $5,000 or 50% of whatever wages were paid. If it was $10,000, you could take $5,000 and apply it against your tax return, your payroll tax, as if you had paid $5,000 in taxes. And then if you have an overpayment of taxes, you can carry that forward. And so you're just getting sort of this free extra 50%. And there are two bills that have been passed by the House and by the Senate, but they haven't passed the opposite, so they're not yet law, which we could talk about in a bit if there's time. But it's the HEALS Act and the HEROES Act, and they actually want to increase that amount. The HEROES Act wants to increase it from $10,000 of wages. They want to increase it to $30,000 of wages, and I think 65% of a credit. And then the HEALS Act wants to keep it at $10,000, but wants to make it 80% of a credit. So on $10,000, you would be able to claim you paid $12,000. No, on 80%, yeah. Anyway, $8,000 of a credit, and then you don't have to pay taxes until that credit runs out. So that's another important point. And the third point I wanted to make was about the payroll tax deferment that businesses are able to take right now if you have employees. So from September through the end of the year, there was a executive memorandum that was put into effect in August. And what that says is that for business owners who pay payroll taxes, which is about 6.2%, you don't have to pay that through the end of the year. The important thing I want everyone to know if you do that is you are going to pay it in 2021. So be prepared to pay an additional 6.2% in 2021. If you withhold it, don't withhold it from your employees, have them be prepared to sort of get hit with that twice in 2021. And I will add, payroll taxes are the number one reason that I see business clients get into tax trouble with the IRS. So I'm very strongly encouraging people to have a plan if they do this deferral, because it does snowball out of control with penalties and interest.
Those are three fantastic points, great information. Some of that I was aware of, some of it I wasn't. So I'm sure people listening right now are definitely going to say, I didn't know all of that. And especially that last point about you're going to have to make it up next year. You do have to be prepared for that, right? So let's talk when we go back to normal, right? COVID is being handled and we go back to running our businesses in a semi-normal fashion, or at least we're not dependent on government assistance and things like this. When you're running a business in a normal fashion, give me one or two of your best practices, the ways to file your taxes and have great relationship with IRS, and one or two red flags that are going to get you in trouble or potential trouble with the IRS in general when filing your business taxes.
Yeah. So number one, make sure you're making your estimated tax payments. Estimated tax payments are due 4 times a year: first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter estimated tax payments. So for example, the third quarter estimated tax payment is going to be due here September 15th, 2020. Fourth quarter estimated tax payment is going to be due January 15th, 2021. The reason, and that sounds so simple, but what it is throughout the year, if you were to break your year up into these incremental segments of quarters, you just calculate how much money you've made in that quarter and then estimate the amount of taxes that you owe on that set amount of money in that quarter and send the IRS a check. And the IRS requires it, so you get a penalty if you don't make these payments. But it's a good requirement as a former accountant and as a tax attorney who helps people, business owners who are in trouble with the IRS. It's a good requirement in that another reason people end up in tax trouble is the entire year goes by without making these estimated tax payments. And so then when you calculate at the end of the year how much you owe, you don't have that huge lump sum sitting around. And it's the first piece of advice I give every business owner. Make your estimated tax payments. It's a smaller chunk to bite off throughout the year. And at least if the fourth quarter does roll around and you don't have the money, you've paid in a good amount, and whatever little amount that is left, you might be able to get into a payment plan or something like that. And it's just much more easy to digest. that would be number one. When I give people this advice about making these estimates and paying their estimated tax payments throughout the year, everybody says, I don't know how to calculate my taxes, and which is a valid question. I'm an accountant, I'm a tax attorney. I have to make estimated tax payments for my own income, and I don't like doing it, and I know how to do it. So when you're a business owner, you're working on your business, you're trying to generate income, you're focused on the overhead and the revenue. You don't necessarily think, oh, okay, estimated tax payments are due. Let me stop, go back through all the income through this quarter, and what are the tax brackets anyway? Where am I going to fall? So I understand that, and I would encourage everybody to find an accountant if that's not something you feel comfortable doing, and have someone take care of your bookkeeping. And every quarter there's accountants who will just do your estimated tax payment every quarter. There are accountants who will do ongoing profit and loss statements so you know where you're at every single month. For us personally, we actually do our books every single day. We hired an accountant who does our overhead and does our revenue every single day, so we know where we're at. And it's not just because we're meticulous, because myself and my business partner, Rod Polston, we're both accountants, we're both attorneys. But I do think that that's an important fundamental piece of running a business, is knowing where you're at. You know, it's sort of like you can't just at the end of, let's just use basketball. I love basketball. At the end of a game, you can't just say, oh, we lost, what happened? You sort of have these quarters where you pause, you look at the score, you figure out how, who's doing good, who's doing bad, you bench people, and you change your strategy as the game goes on each quarter, depending on what's happening. I think the same thing's true for business.
That's a perfect segue. Thank you for helping me with the segue here, because I want to talk about your role as co-owner of Polston. I see a lot of your marketing out in the world in various forms. And so I'm very curious your strategy and your approach to how you market the firm and the partners and all the things that go into how you try to attract the right audience to Polston Tax.
Great question. So I'm not the marketing expert, you are, but I will tell you our general.
But it comes from the top, the folks in charge, whether you're owner or in the C-suite or just a decision maker, right? You're involved in the process, working with your professionals in-house and third party, et cetera, to set those strategies, right? So what's the overall corporate strategy for how you want to attract the right audience for your business?
I would agree in that I think that the strategy we use for our marketing is a reflection of who Rod Polston and myself both are. So fundamentally, we both deeply care for people. So even if we weren't accountants or attorneys, I think no matter what, we would be doing something that enabled us to help people, because that's what we both find a great deal of purpose in, is helping other people. It just so happens we have this accounting knowledge and tax knowledge, and we both have a heart for business owners and believe in the business community. And so it's just very organic for us to be able to help the business community. So if I were to say a strategy that we use in marketing is that we don't try to make it about us. We always try to think, let's put ourselves in the business owner's shoes that is struggling with the IRS. What is happening to them? They're not sleeping at night. They're stressed and scared and ashamed and not telling people about the trouble that they're in. So many are suicidal. So we try to just imagine the dark place that they are in, and not so much tout our success or what we've accomplished, but more think through how do we connect and reach the people who don't even want to acknowledge the problem and reach them where they are.
So you mentioned caring for people. And I happen to know a few people that work for you, and they would describe your corporate culture as very good. So Now, we've talked externally how you do advertising and how you try to draw audience, but internally, what do you do and what is your approach for really developing quality corporate culture for the people who work with you?
That's a good question. That's a great question, actually. I would say the most important, we consider one of the most important pieces of running any business is, first and foremost, the business owners have to understand their why. Why are you running this business? What do you consider your purpose in life in general? And Rod and I already knew our why before we had met, before we had were business partners, and like I said, our why is definitely helping other people. We find a great deal of purpose in helping other people, but because we knew our why, it also is the center of the business. And when we bring new employees on, we have an onboarding process, and the most important piece of that onboarding process is making sure new employees understand the why. I can't, so now we have 125 employees in 6 states, maybe more and counting, and there's no way for me to be able to answer every single employee's question as they arise. And really, at this point, I think we have about 18 managers who manage all these different departments and employees and pieces of the puzzle. But the question everyone needs to be able to answer is, what's the why? And am I accomplishing the why in responding to this client or in solving this problem? And, I might not have said, oh, when X, Y, and Z happens, here's the right answer, because X, Y, and Z may never have happened before, and I wouldn't even know to tell someone that. But if they can answer that in line with our why, I think it helps the entire organization stay on track to accomplish their goal.
Let's shift the conversation a little bit to you personally. So not only are you an attorney, an accountant, and a business owner, you're a public speaker. You've made multiple 40 under 40 lists. You've been listed in Super Lawyer magazine. You've been featured on TV shows. What is your personal philosophy for developing and maintaining a self-brand within the structure of Polston Tax and your business entity? How do you as an individual accelerate yourself while remaining attached to your business?
Well, I will tell you what I do. I feel ill-equipped as the non-marketing person in this conversation, but I will tell you what I personally try to do, and that is, so I am an attorney, I am an accountant, and many of my clients may only interact with me in that regard. They may only contact me at that point when they need that specific legal help. But outside of that, obviously I have a belief system that's greater than the laws of the United States tax code. And I do try to be transparent about the priorities that I have and the things that I value. And I share those things across all social media platforms I'm on, whether it be this morning I shared a thought about not trying to look at where other people are at, but just trying to compete with yourself, and that fixating on other people, ultimately, when you land in the top spot, you may wonder, are other people laughing at me being in the top spot because you're so focused on what other people think or where other people are at? Just be competing with yourself every day. And the reason I shared that this morning isn't because I thought it was some great word of wisdom. It's just what I think. It's what I think. It's how I try to live my life. And I think that all the things that you named that have come my way have been the combination of opportunity and preparedness. So I maximize my potential, and if an opportunity or an accolade comes my way, it's because I'm trying to maximize myself. And those types of philosophies that I have about life, I enjoy sharing them. I have no qualms about people knowing the real Rachel Mathew.
In fact, you've been very frank recently about things in your personal life, have nothing to do with your profession, but you as a person, that you have shared on social media. You've been very open about a lot of things happening in your personal life. What was your thought process, and did you have an internal discussion in your own head or with trusted people in your inner circle about how much do I want to share about my personal life and how much of it do I want to keep behind the veil of my professional image?
Yeah, I thought it was an important general conversation about branding specifically and starting over and facing challenges. And one of the reasons I decided to share these challenges is that I think that especially as you're facing an incredibly difficult challenge in life, that exact moment is the toughest moment to be transparent about it, particularly with the world. It's easy enough to talk about it in hindsight when it's all in the past and now here's the lessons learned. But the reality of the challenge is when the challenge is happening. I thought it was an important conversation starter about facing challenges and not reflecting on them after, there's value in that as well. But in my case, it was about branding, the cost that had been involved, the expense ahead of me, and just starting over. And I have been, I'm not going to say surprised, that's not the right word. I've received a lot of positive feedback from individuals who are facing similar challenges or completely different challenges, that were encouraged by the transparency I shared in the moment, which you really don't see a lot of that.
Well, I want to congratulate you on your bravery and your dedication to authenticity. Anyone who's ever listened to the podcast knows we talk about authenticity all the time. The whole point of social media is authenticity. And so I think you nailed that perfectly. And when a person feels good about being authentic online, I think that's the best example of what social media can be for individuals and professionals.
Yeah, that's very kind.
Well, that's an amazing amount of information that we've received from Rachel today. Obviously, starting with the tax information, all the stuff happening right now with COVID-19, with EIDL and PPPL, talking about how to best set up your business for IRS success. We talked about how strategies for running a small business, building corporate culture, and then integrating personal brand as well. You really ran the gamut today of information. I think this is going to be super informative for our listeners. I think we're going to get a lot of positive feedback from this conversation. I know I learned some things today, so I'm hoping that everyone else did as well. So I want to thank you very much, Rachel, for being on the podcast today. And good luck in everything. Hopefully the COVID-19 thing works out and we all get back to business as usual. Both on the professional level and our personal lives as well. Is there any bit of advice you want to leave everyone on?
I would just say that the most important piece of advice I can give anyone right now is to stay hopeful. America has always been a country of aspiration, and we have pulled ourselves out of worse storms. And time again, we have proven not just how resilient we are, but how much better we can be as a country. And I foresee that happening again. So I want every business owner who's listening to just feel very hopeful that after this storm, there is going to be sunshine and rainbows ahead.
That is a fantastic way to end this episode. Rachel Mathew, our special guest, co-owner of Polston Tax, an attorney and accountant, giving us great advice for business and our personal brand today. Thank you so much, Rachel. Everyone, remember, always stay updated with the Neo Marketing Podcast by hitting that subscribe button. Leave us a comment, leave us a rating, and give us suggestions on topics and guests you would like to see on future episodes. So until we meet again, good luck.
This has been the Golden Group Neo Marketing Podcast. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Tell a friend, leave a review, and engage with us on social media. Thanks for listening.